Well, good morning. More than 24, 36 hours. I often say it, well, for decades. The old Harold Wilson saying a week is a long time in politics, that was in the 60s. We're now talking 60 years later and pace of life has changed, new technologies, social media, everything else. Probably a day is a long time in politics. But what a turmoil. Now, the first thing, of course, I don't think I'm wrong, no government, individuals have, but no government has ever been held in contempt of Parliament. How shameful is that? In a democracy, well, it could be a better democracy, it could be a fairer democracy, it could be a fairer voting democracy, but I won't go into that today. In the democracy of today, what a shameful thing. Parliament is sovereign. Those who follow me on social media and all its outlets have heard me say it endless times. And I had no doubt. You can say, he's a bit clever. No, it's nothing to do with that. I had no doubt that at the end of the day, the sovereignty of our Parliament will prevail. Now, the Attorney General did a bombastic performance, in parts very good, in parts silly, in other parts an amateur dramatic person. But he thought he could turn Parliament around. He thought he could bully or push these people into following the government line, but no, it wasn't going to be. Because you cannot. And this is what Cameron didn't understand. This is what May doesn't understand. This is what the Leavers, the 17 million Leavers, don't understand. Parliament is never instructed. Parliament is never told what to do. Parliament is not mandated by anyone. It's not a trade union movement. It's not a club. It's not a golf club or a party club or whatever. These are 600 plus individual members of Parliament. And I had little doubt that when push came to shove, little doubt that they would hold their nerve and they would remember 400 years of history that we have a parliamentary democracy and Parliament is sovereign. Anyway, there's enough of that. But what a tangled web we weave, eh? When first we set out, that's not the correct word, what a tangled web we weave. To first we practice to deceive. And that's been the story, hasn't it? Gove will hold all the cards. David Davis will have trade agreements by the time we leave. Fox, it'll be the easiest thing we do in the history of mankind. Johnson will have all this money to put on the bus on NHS or whatever. And then May, a Remainer. One of those like us who believed that Europe and the European Union is central to everything we do. And that's where we belong. Then for 2.5 years, has behaved totally differently. People say no one thought of Northern Ireland. To be fair to Mrs May, she did. In a speech during the EU referendum, she warned the country of the dangers in relation to the border in Northern Ireland. She warned the country of the dangers of losing out trade-wise or disentangling ourselves from Europe. That's what she said. I've read her speech endlessly. And I have trouble understanding now whether I'm a believer as I used to be when I was young. I was brought up on a religious Christian hearth. And I'm not going to say I never lied, but I don't often lie. I tend to be a person of my word. And I do my best to keep to that. Mrs May, a daughter of the vicarage, how can she say the things she is saying. When, if you read her speeches, if you read everything, that's not what she believed in. Anyway, she's a daughter of the vicarage, and she's an Anglo-Saxon, and she's hoist by a few things because of that. One, immigration. The other one, I'm a bloody difficult woman. And the other one, Europe is not going to tell us what to do. Maggie Thatcher said that. Maggie many times challenged Europe, went to the Council of Europe and spoke up more than any other British Prime Minister against some of the things that were going on. But she never ever thought that leaving was good. She never ever thought that leaving the single market was going to be to the benefit of Britain. That's the difference between Mrs. May and Maggie Thatcher. There is no comparison. Maggie Thatcher understood the game. Mrs. May plays party politics, trying to keep her place, trying to keep her party together. But it's impossible to keep a party together. I've been there before, in the early 70s, and that's why I'm so intrigued by what happened yesterday. In the early 70s, during the debate of joining, it was the Labour Party that was mainly split. 60, 70 of the Labour MPs voted with Ted Heath to join Europe. And many of the Labour top people, Michael Foot, Peter Shaw, Tony Benn, they joined with Enoch Powell to argue about not joining. That's how it was. They were big fanatic debates. And for a few hours, when the Attorney General was speaking, and all the 2 or 3 hours last night, I saw a glimpse of how it was some 45, 50 years ago. What's going to happen next week? I have no idea at the moment. Anything is possible. Anything. We are in the biggest constitutional crisis in my lifetime, certainly. The Spectator magazine said, I read it the other day, it's the worst period since the 1700s for the Constitution and the parliamentary crisis. Well, I don't know about that. I wasn't around in those years. But we are in a crisis. Anything is possible now. And let's see what happens to the stubborn Mrs. May. She's been found out, you see. When the Attorney General said the treaty, the agreement on the backstop, they're all a gamble. There is no legal certainty in anything of it. And there isn't. We cannot just leave at the end of March. Into what? What's the future? And all sorts of promises. We've been there before, haven't we? We've done the promises during the European referendum, and it never worked. And it wasn't true. And it was misleading. All the promises in the world is not going to convince people now. It's going to be an uncertain period. It's a voyage into a sea of undiscovered problems. The waves will be high if we leave. It'll be a stormy, not couple of years for the transition. I tell you, the transition will be much longer than 2 years. Mrs. May knows that, but she ain't going to admit it. It's not safe to admit it. Rees-Mogg and Johnson and all those people, they'd go ballistic if she ever admitted it. We all know. Agreeing a new relationship with Europe will take years. Having trade deals across the world will take the whole of the 2020s. That's how it is. That's the modern world we live in. It ain't going to happen quickly. So there we go, look. I've got to finish now. I want to catch a train. I'm going to go up there I can't be out. You know, it's been the worst things I ever did in my life, I believe. Even though I enjoyed 20 years inspecting schools, and we inspected 10,000 across England and Wales over those years, I have missed politics an almighty lot. I left it too early in 1992, but there we are. It is, and we are where we are. But remember what just Wilson said. Remember what Walter Scott in his romantic poem said about the tangled web we weave. But also what Shakespeare said in Julius Caesar, Act 4, I think it was, about there's a tide in the time of man. When taken when the tide is the time of man, when taken at the flood. And that's where we are. I'll start with that quote next time. Cheers. Bye.